to my computer. All right. Well, welcome everybody to our first Hot Shots. I won't call it a virtual session because you all are sitting in the room right now, but kind of our remote session, if you will. We're going to have Adam introduce Josh here in a second. One of the things that we have had come back over the last couple of years with the Hot Shot evaluations is people wanting to know a little bit more about HATZALAH and the role of HATZALAH and where does HATZALAH pop up and how do they get there and all that fun stuff. So we thought we would get that answered this year. Obviously, because we are doing this on a Saturday, we are obviously in the Sabbath. So since Josh couldn't be there live with us today, I think we would have had to have gone over and picked him up on our shoulders and carried him over and sat him. That what we're going to do is we decided we would kind of be innovative and bring a video in. So that's what we're going to do for you for about the next, I think, 45 minutes or so. So, Adam, I'm going to let you introduce Josh, and then we will start our interactive back and forth with our friend here.
Sure. So everyone, I'd like to welcome Josh Hartman, Chief of Bergen HATZALAH, old friend and colleague who I'd worked with many years ago as an ALS provider in our Englewood days. But
Some of
Josh,
us are still in our Englewood days.
yeah, I think I might have had hair back then. But if you can just give us an introduction, some background to, describing your role with Bergen HATZALAH.
Sure. So Bergen HATZALAH was founded, launched on September 3rd, 2021. And I was or am a co-founder of the organization. I'm also the president and one of three chiefs from an administrative and operational perspective of Bergen HATZALAH. Bergen HATZALAH is a chapter, let's call it, of the larger what's called Chevra HATZALAH, or the what I call the mothership. We are affiliated with the HATZALAH that is New York City based. So understand that HATZALAH is just a translation means rescue. And there are chapters of HATZALAH all over the world. It's the second largest volunteer organization, EMS organization in the world. So Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Geneva, Switzerland, Amsterdam, Netherlands. I mean, that's just a smattering of what's out there in the chapters. We started ours in September of 2021, and there are multiple chapters throughout New Jersey of which we collaborate. We all have our own responsibilities, our own administration. We try and collaborate on purchasing of large equipment, but in general, all the HATZALAHs are their own agencies that fall under the same concept of EMS.
Okay, excellent. What drew you to this work? What is your background or what shaped your approach to EMS in all these years?
So I've been in EMS since 1996. I fell into EMS really earlier than that. So in 1991, I became a lifeguard on the beaches of Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, and they put me through EMT school. And I said, this is kind of cool. So in 1992, I became an EMT. I was an EMT until I became a paramedic in 1997. And in 1997, I started working in New York City as a medic, and then in 1998 in New Jersey as a paramedic. And I really enjoyed being an EMT. It was kind of a way to give back a little bit more than as I was a lifeguard and then a supervisor. And then, as I'm sure everyone in the room understands, you get the bug, and once you get the bug, it's hard to let the bug go. And so I've been a per diem paramedic since 1998 in various places. In New Jersey, I've been at Pascack Valley until it closed. Then I was at Holy Name, and this entire time, and I remain a paramedic and tour chief at Englewood Health. So that's how I got into EMS. How I got into HATZALAH was that I finished college, I moved to the Upper West Side, and a good friend of mine was already an EMT, and he said, "Oh, you're an EMT now from South Carolina. We have to figure out how to get you to become an EMT in New York." And so I became involved in West Side HATZALAH. And then as soon as I became a paramedic on West Side HATZALAH. Kept that, still operate as a paramedic in New York City, still operate as a volunteer paramedic with HATZALAH in Manhattan, and I have responsibilities for the paramedics, the ALS group within Manhattan and the Bronx.
Excellent. Now, is this job with Bergen HATZALAH your full-time job, or do you have another career that you work side by side with this?
Sure. So, if it were my full-time career, I'd be in a lot of trouble. HATZALAH is an all-volunteer organization. None of us get paid. That goes from the dispatchers to the service units who take care of our ambulances and our fly cars to the EMTs and everyone in between. There are very few. There's no complete administrative role for us, so it's all volunteer. So no, I volunteer with HATZALAH, and then my full-time job, I work at a company called HMP Global, and we put on large medical conferences. I cover one that you may have heard of called EMS World and EMS World Expo. So that's part of my full-time job.
Excellent.
Just can't get away from the EMS, can you?
I can't. It brought me back. They brought me back. I just covered cardiology, and then now I cover EMS also since we acquired that in 2018.
Ah, good, cool. So talk a little bit about how are you guys staffed up there? I mean, how many ambulances do you have on at any given time, and how do you kind of handle the whole kind of the logistics of your operation?
Sure. I want to be clear at the outset that although I collaborate with all the HATZALAHs within New Jersey, when I speak today, I'm representing Bergen HATZALAH. I don't have administrative responsibilities, operational responsibilities for any of the other local chapters of HATZALAH in New Jersey, of which I have great admiration, just like I have great admiration for all volunteer and paid EMS throughout the state. But just to be clear, when I'm speaking today, I'm focusing on our operations because that's what I know about. And I would venture to say that most of the operations of HATZALAH in New Jersey are similar, but just for clarity purposes and transparency, I'm referring to Bergen HATZALAH when I speak about our operations. So we currently have 5 ambulances located within Bergen County. We generally consider our operating area anywhere starting at the George Washington Bridge and going west on Route 4, for example, out towards Fairlawn. And then if you come back towards the George Washington Bridge and you head up the Palisades Interstate Parkway to exit, officially it's exit 4, but really exit 3, 4, and then create a hypotenuse of that right triangle, that's generally our area. Obviously, there are areas of concentration where we get more calls and concentration of areas where we don't get any calls. But that triangle generally defines our area. We have a decentralized model, which is very different from either a municipal system or a volunteer system where we don't come out of a station. And I think that is something that's unique to HATZALAH that many people don't understand, that I thought I would just spend a moment or two just to kind of describe. So every EMT that volunteers with Bergen HATZALAH has BLS equipment, and we're all EMS professionals, volunteers here, so I don't need to go into the gory details, but everything that you'd have in an ambulance minus the mobility of it. So no stair chairs, no stretchers, obviously, or anything like that, no backboards, but your first in bag with all of the equipment in there, whether it's oxygen, Narcan, epi, albuterol, so an AED, all that equipment, every single EMT has in their personal vehicle. In addition to the personal vehicles, we have 8 first response vehicles that have the same equipment plus a little bit more, in addition to the 5 ambulances. So when we respond to a scene, we respond directly to the scene with someone with equipment. Usually 2 people directly to the scene. Both of them have equipment, but really, clearly, we only need one. But for one patient. And the average response time from dial to door, as I like to call it, so the time someone calls HATZALAH to the time someone knocks on their door, is generally around 90, about 3 minutes. So 3 minutes to 4 minutes, response time. There are many times where we will get to the door and the patient or family member is still on the phone with the dispatcher giving them information. Not even that the dispatcher is saying, "Hold on, stay on the phone with me until they get there," but they're not even done giving information and we'll be there. And again, it's this decentralized model. We just have people located throughout the entire community, whether it's someone who's shopping at ShopRite, whether it's someone who's sitting at services in the synagogue, or someone who's in their law firm where they work. They're just all over the place. We're like cockroaches of EMS. We're like everywhere. So that's how we reduce our response times, is because not only do we have people everywhere, we have equipment everywhere because they're with all the people that are located throughout the county. So obviously, in addition to the people who are first responding, we send an ambulance to every call, and there's two people on the ambulance who are responding. But the ambulance has an average response time of 7 to 8 minutes, whereas we have a response time of 3 to 4 minutes for first response. So that's really what and other interestingly, since we've started, other volunteer organizations have started to try to replicate this decentralized model, and I think it's great if it works for them and it works for their community. It's amazing. But yeah, we brought this from other Hatzalahs who are already around in New Jersey, those in New York. We all operate under a very similar model.
Right. And that also kind of parlays into some of the stuff that I've seen that do come out of Israel, where you've got individuals that are out, different layers of provider that are out on scooters, motorbikes, things like that, to get that first response so imminently quick. And I think that's interesting that that's played out even here in the States where you guys are working. So let me ask you this. How do they get a hold of you? If somebody is injured and they obviously are wanting your service, what do? They pick up and call 911, and whoever answers the phone, they say, "Get me Hatzalah." How does
No,
that work?
yeah, Hatzalah has its own dispatch system.
So you've got your own number, and whoever's going to use Hatzalah knows that number, and that's the number that they call for
Yeah,
medical
and it's
assistance.
published on the website.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Excellent. Very, very interesting. So, and again, and again, as we're sitting here talking, I think anyone who is listening to this really kind of conjures up the fact that what you're talking really is really what all of us are kind of looking to do, are doing, or aspire to do in the way we handle things. We've all got our catchment area. We all, within the different Hatzalah groups, just like the different community-based and or big box, we'll call them, career ambulance services out there now. We're all out there. We're all working synchronously or asynchronously sometimes with one another.
Yeah.
And so it really just kind of goes to show Hatzalah has integrated in, and it really is really no different than the fabric, if you will, of EMS in whatever landscape it's operating in, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of our EMTs carry the same card as every other EMT in the state. All of our ambulances have the same sticker from New Jersey's OEMS on the side of it.
Yep.
They're all licensed ambulances. We're a licensed BLS agency. All our EMTs have, EMT cards. So there's very little difference from the way that we care for our patients, right? My expectation, just like my expectation when I'm a tour chief at Englewood, the same as my expectation when I'm the chief at Bergen HATZALAH, is that everybody treats the patient in front of them as if it was their child, sister, mother, brother, grandparent. There's no difference there. We have a difference in our response model, and the difference in how we're funded, although many rely on donations, but we rely entirely on donations. We don't have another funding model. So that is something that's relatively unique, is that we're 100% donation based in our funding mechanism. But from an operations perspective of treating EMTs and mutual aid, we provide the same great care that every other EMS agency out there in the state of New Jersey and beyond provide.
So let's talk about mutual aid. How often are you called mutual aid into surrounding areas? Does that happen very frequently?
It does not happen very frequently. Most EMS agencies don't require additional mutual aid beyond the mutual aid that they may have established already. And we're here to support anyone who needs their support. We're not, certainly don't want to be seen as intrusive and taking anyone else's calls. So we're here if anyone wants our help. We're certainly here. We've provided manpower, for example, at fires in the past where they just needed some additional resources. We provided ambulances if everybody in the town is busy. But I would say it's very infrequent that we're called in to do mutual aid, but we're happy to do it if anyone is in need.
And what's your call volume? What's your approximate call volume, better monthly or annually, just for Bergen
Sure.
County?
Bergen HATZALAH, again, we're only talking about Bergen HATZALAH. We average about 12 to 1,300 calls a year. Now, remember, we're still young. We're only 3 years, 3+ years old. So we average about 12, 1,300 calls a year.
It's pretty appreciable. I think for any, modest size agency that's out there. My own agency in Somerville, we're the same way. We run about 1,400 calls a year. And that's in a
Yeah.
relatively condensed area, but that's also being a primary service provider within a municipality.
Yeah, exactly. So we're wide, not deep, right? We have a very
Yeah,
wide catchment area, but we don't have a significant call volume. I guess defining significant is difficult, as you say, because you have so many different types of agencies out there. But I think probably what I would point out is that since we've started, the trajectory has been upward, right? So we're at 1,300 now, but if we would be speaking last year, the number would probably be around, 1,000. And if we talked the year before, it'd probably be around 600. So it's certainly growing. There's absolutely continuing growth in our call volume. So let's see what happens if we talk next year.
for sure, for sure. So, obviously there's been not only the expansion that you've talked about with your call volume, but there's also the expansion of HATZALAH in general. So talk a little bit about factors that are contributing to HATZALAH's expansion into different areas of New Jersey.
Sure. So Hatzalah has been around for quite some time, but I use COVID as kind of the landmark. When COVID struck, many of the Jewish community, and I'm sure the non-Jewish community too, but moved from New York City into the suburbs. And one of the areas to which they moved were the local towns in Bergen County that already had a significant Jewish community, and it just bougined as to how many new families moved into Englewood, Teaneck, Bergenfield, Fairlawn, just to name a few of the communities that we serve in Bergen County. So at the time, so now you're talking 21, early 21, not only do you have a lot of families moving to Bergen County from the New York City Jewish community, but you have a lot of Hatzalah volunteers who are part of those families that are moving from New York City into Bergen County. And so like we talked about before, I've been a paramedic in Bergen County for 26 years and have always worked with the local volunteers of the municipalities and the hospital-based EMS. And it's clear that over the past 5, 8 years or so, we keep seeing dwindling municipal volunteer EMS agencies, and the hospitals are taking over. And they're doing a great job, and I'm sorry to see the volunteers go. It's just the way that this has gone. And Bergen County is not unique, obviously. This is a national phenomenon, not a local phenomenon. And so when I lived here in England for so many years, and everyone knows I'm a paramedic in my community. And so they say, well, why don't you have Hatzalah, right? They're asking me this in 2005, 2010. And the answer was we have very good coverage with our municipal local EMS and the hospital-based system, and there really wasn't a need. Well, when you combine this perfect storm of a decrease in supply and an increase in demand, we came around to help fill that gap, to create more equilibrium between the supply and demand of pre-hospital care in our area. And so that's why we started in 2021. And that's how we started to staff. We were very lucky because we started to staff with people who had lived here already, like myself and others, and then those that had just recently moved in and were already EMTs. So you had very little training that we needed to do to catch them up.
Well, it definitely seems like you guys are definitely, engrossed and, having people who understand the cultural competencies of your people. Hutzel is deeply rooted in your community, right?
Yeah.
So how has that cultural familiarity enhanced the ability of these individuals to provide emergency care?
Sure. I mean, if we think back around how Hatzalah all got started in Brooklyn, 50 years ago plus, it was someone who called 911 and really couldn't do anything to help the person who, in that case, happened to have been in respiratory distress between the time that they recognized the incident and the time that the ambulance arrived. And so he decided that, the next week he was going to learn how to use an oxygen tank and a non-rebreather mask. Now, obviously, we've come a very long way since then, but the essence is the same, is that we're looking to provide medical assistance, pre-hospital care to the community. And part of that is the geography of the community, and the other is the culture of the community. So the geography we kind of talked about already is that we're all neighbors. We all see each other. We live near each other. We're all geographically close together. So when I go to a call, it's oftentimes someone I know, or they know my children, or they know my wife, or, it's a relatively geographically small community. Culturally, though, it also has resonance, and that's when it comes to various things like death and dying is an example. That there are certain customs that are practiced when we arrive, and either we treat and pronounce, or we just pronounce, again on an ALS basis, but that there are certain customs related to that. Another would be certain clothing that are worn by the Orthodox Jewish community. And if, for example, someone gets into an MVA, MVC, whatever we're calling it these days, and we want to make them, quote, trauma naked. Well, there are certain holy garments that obviously in a true emergency where we're talking life and death and you need to access the chest or something, then you got to do what you got to do. Life is more important than anything in the Jewish religion. And I would argue in most religions, I can't speak to the others, but that life is more important than anything else. So all is forgiven if it's a true life and death emergency. But the vast majority of our emergencies are not true life and death where you could take another 10, 15 seconds to, to take care about something, but you have to know about what it is to take care about it. So I'd say the clothing is one, the Sabbath, how the Sabbath is treated. Steve kind of mentioned how they'd have to pick me up, put me on their shoulders, and take me to your meeting because we don't use any electricity or drive anywhere on the Sabbath. Of course, unless it is a life-threatening emergency. We could talk about our response model on the Sabbath if you want as well. But in essence, it's knowing about, well, they don't really want to sign something as an RMA, for example, unless they're required to by medical control for some reason or another. So there are various customs which we are intricately engaged and involved in that put people at ease. It isn't as if that when the 911 paramedics come there that they're not culturally sensitive. We all take cultural sensitivity classes as part of our paramedic or EMT program, but there's just something about the knowledge that this is someone who knows without any explanation what is going on. Culturally, hopefully medically as well, but culturally. And so there is an extreme appreciation within the community and this kind of sigh of relief when someone from the community arrives to help them in what they consider to be, their direst of times.
Absolutely. I mean, it's great to know that they have that understanding of the culture and what their beliefs are. Now, do any of your team members, excuse me, um, you know, do they go out in the community otherwise, not responding to emergencies, to, build trust, support, and understanding to the diverse neighborhoods? Like you had said, you don't really go mutual aid, but what happens if you do go mutual aid, and someone doesn't see their local volunteer system or the hospital that they know and HATZALAH shows up? How do you build that rapport?
Sure. We have relationships with all the EMS agencies here. We offer, for example, if they get called as a 911 agency to an Orthodox Jewish person and they have a question, forget about medical care. They just have a question. They have our number and they can call us and we can provide either consultation over the phone or send one of our members out to help bridge any sort of concerns there. So we don't necessarily need to be the ones treating the patient, but if there is a need, a desire out there in the field, we've communicated with all of the agencies near us that if they just want a liaison, forget an EMT, they happen to be an EMT, but if they want a liaison that can help them, we're absolutely thrilled to be able to provide a service of that type. Out in the community, absolutely, we do. We just did a new grandmother CPR class last week, so we're out in the community because we want them to know we're around. Our vehicles are driving around the community all the time, so they see them out and about. And certainly from an communal education perspective, we work with the synagogues to make sure that they have AEDs and people who know how to use those AEDs, that the AEDs are in a location that can be accessible by everyone. We do stop the bleed classes in some of the synagogues and schools. So we're definitely more than an EMS agency. I know some EMS agencies do this as well, but we're definitely more than an EMS agency. I think another one of the areas, going back to the death and dying, there's a lot of complexities in pre-hospital death. We all know that, right? There's just a lot of complexities as to what's going on, how it happened, who's there, who wasn't there, who has to be called. All that requires navigation. As a 911 paramedic, I when I pronounce a patient, do an interim pronouncement, I sit down with the family. I discuss with the family what has happened, what the next steps are, and then they transition over to whether it's PD who's staying there or the ME. Hatzalah generally, and I can't say this happens 100% of the time, but it's 100% of the time that I'm aware of, we keep a liaison on the scene throughout the encounter. So the EMS portion of our responsibility is complete. The paramedics have come, they've done the pre-hospital pronouncement, but we will keep someone on scene with the family all the way through until when the body is picked up and taken usually to a funeral home or could be to the ME. There is a custom in the Jewish religion that the body of a deceased remains in the company of someone until it is interred, until it is buried. And so this has nothing to do with how religious the patient was or what synagogue they go to. It's completely irrelevant. We keep someone there from the moment that the pre-hospital pronouncement is done until they have someone else, and sometimes they don't have someone else, to stay with the body throughout its encounter. And it goes through spiritual cleansing, it's actual physical cleansing, but it's done in a certain way after death and before interment. And so there are psalms that are said. There's a whole lot of customs that go along with it. And that is something that clearly is not done on the no one would even know about it in the 911 basis. But this is something that we do, thank God, not frequently, but all the time in the situation of a pre-hospital death.
No, it's definitely something that a lot of people don't understand. Something that I thought about while you were talking about customs, and I know Steve's going to pick you up over his shoulder and drag you, on the Sabbath, but what happens on the Sabbath with your staff? Do they respond? Do they drive? Do you have someone who drives the ambulance for you? How are you notified, by these devices, or how does that happen?
Sure. So Hatzalah, from an operations perspective, really has two authorities to whom it answers. One is a medical authority, and one is a religious authority. The medical authority, everyone is aware of because it's a licensed agency that has the same requirements as everyone else. On the religious side, though, there is a rabbinic board, a board of rabbis that are trained in either they're also physicians or they've gone through training on emergency medicine, medical ethics, medical legal ethics, and they establish how the organization will operate when there's a connection or a nexus at the religious and the medical side. So obviously medical takes precedence. There's no involvement of the rabbinic side when it comes to medicine. But for example, every year every member has to go through a CME for the implications of the religion on our operations.
No.
We are not one of them. There are Hatzalas that will not drive their ambulance after the call is over from the hospital back to its original spot, right? Back to wherever it started, because their sense is that it's no longer an emergency. And so the Sabbath should essentially take precedence. Our rabbis have basically told us that it's essentially Tuesday from the time you get dispatched until the time you're back from where the call is. And the rationale that they use to close that last gap from a halachic, which is the Jewish law perspective, is that we want to make sure that the people are back to where they can be reset and ready to go as soon as possible. And so we do carry that last leg, but others, not many others, but other chapters don't do that. So we get dispatched through a radio system. The radio goes off. It is essentially quiet unless there's a call in our area. Once there's a call in our area, we would respond to that call over the radio, just like it's Tuesday, saying that we're going to the call. We would get in our car. We would get in the car just like it was on Tuesday, but we would use a slight difference in the way that we would start the engine, just to create a difference that we recognize that it's the Sabbath and not Tuesday. It doesn't change how the car starts. I'll give you an example. Most of our cars are push start, they're not turnkey. So instead of using my forefinger, which is what I do Monday through, Sunday through Friday, I might use my pinky or I might use a knuckle, something different that demonstrates it's a different day than it was on Tuesday. But the engine still starts. I still put my seatbelt on and go to the call just like I would. I tell them everything is exactly just like it was Tuesday until the call is over. There's no difference in anything that we do from a medical treatment response model. Everything remains exactly the same.
Okay.
And then once we get back, it's as if, it is back to being Sabbath. So that could put some logistics, meaning like, let's say I started at place A, but the ambulance ends up at place B because that's where the ambulance started and I'm on the ambulance. Well, now I got to walk from where the ambulance is parked back to wherever A is to go back to my home or back to wherever I'm going. So the Sabbath ends once the call is Sabbath kind of restarts for us once the call is completely over and closed out.
Definitely something learned there.
For sure. That's interesting. And I'm sure that was probably a burgeoning question on everyone's minds sitting in this room today. Let's talk a little bit about training and preparation. I mean, obviously, you guys are EMTs. Some of you are medics. Some of you are the various sundry medical disciplines. What kind of training and onboarding do you do at HATZALAH that provides and ensures, again, the providers are, and I think you've already kind of covered it a little bit, but if there's some nuances there beyond what you've talked about, that they're sensitive to cultural and religious norms?
Sure. So we have monthly CMEs that are required to be attended. They follow the New Jersey guidelines. We also cross with New York because we have a lot of New York EMTs also. So we in our curriculum we cover so that you can get recertified by New York and recertified by New Jersey if you participate in all of our CME programs. In addition to that, we do additional programming such as I spoke about with the Sabbath or holiday CME that we have to go through. We send everyone through every year. We do mega codes. We do PICRI CPR training so that everyone is familiar how to use the Lucas device and how to integrate that into arrests. But I wouldn't say that our training is much different than most EMS organizations that I'm aware of. It's just constant training so that when you get to the arrest, you're not thinking about, oh, what do I need to do? Well, everyone has their role. Everyone needs to step in and do what it is that they were trained to do. Switch every 2 minutes and round robin it. So I don't think that I believe that training is very important. We'll also do training with some of the municipal agencies. So, for example, we've done training with Englewood Fire Department, right? Because we encounter them many times on MVAs. So, or doing standbys for fires. So so we've trained with them. I wouldn't say that our training is so different than any of the other volunteer or paid EMS agencies that are out there.
That's good to know. So, are there any misconceptions about religious or cultural practices that EMS providers outside HATZALAH should be aware of?
I don't, I don't, obviously I don't know. I'm on the inside, not the outside. I know that when I'm at Englewood, for example, I often get questions about, oh, how would the family like to do X if I come across this again? And my answer is almost always the same. Be culturally sensitive, just like I am when I go to treat other cultures. Ask questions. Patients, their families would much rather you ask a question, and don't be embarrassed by it. You're not expected to know anything about other cultures. It's great if you do, but be culturally sensitive, as time permits, right? I understand there are different types of, time sensitive issues, but as time permits, be culturally sensitive, ask questions. Can I do this? Would you rather I do that? That's what I do with other cultures that I don't know much about. So my answer to people is almost always just ask questions. I've never come across someone who asked a question in any culture where the family was like embarrassed or, embarrassed them, I mean, that they shouldn't have asked the question. I think people generally understand that there are nuances. That's what makes us great is that we are a multicultural society. And so learning about each other is important.
Yeah, and I think yeah, you look at I think that's a pearl of wisdom I think we can all take away from this talk is that it doesn't make any difference who you are, what your religious beliefs are, what your cultural indifferences are. At the end of the day, we have to treat each other humanistically. And we see this all too often. You come out and see a motor vehicle crash as an example. First thing we want to do is we want to go hands-on. We want to go trauma naked. And we're really not always communicating directly with that individual. Obviously, when it's not a life-saving, life or limb emergency. So I think a lot of our providers outside of cultures don't always think about the fact that if we are going and starting to remove clothing from people, that we need to be sensitive for everyone. Just it's not a matter of taking the trauma shears out and cutting clothes off. It's not a matter of just starting to rip people clothes off. Talk with them, educate yourselves about them. And more ardently, just because, and particularly in people who are deeply religious, and you mentioned the Orthodox, where they've got certainly the religious garments on, is if you go to remove them or pull them and they become very protective of them, understand that that's the core of who they are. It's the core of their religious beliefs. And they're not trying to be obstinate. They're not being, they're not being interferatory in what you're trying to do. But that's just all part of what makes us very different. And we need to be sensitive to that, regardless of who our patient is and regardless of the conditions that we're in. So I think that this brings that full circle for everybody.
I think of it, I totally agree with everything you said. One of the most sensitive times I am around people's clothing is actually nothing to do with their religion. The a-domicile community, the community who's homeless, they're living on the street and they get struck by a car, and you take off their 3 layers of pants that they're wearing that are the only 3 layers of pants that they own. So it isn't just about religion, it's about being sensitive to all patients. And it's something I think about all the time because I mean, I remember I trained at St. Vincent's in New York City, where there's a tremendous, in that area, homeless community where every unconscious is not actually unconscious, let's say. And it's something we need to be sensitive to. And again, yes, I'm coming at it from a religious perspective, but I could tell you that I'm super sensitive when I'm in the winter and I have a homeless, a domicile patient who we theoretically need to take trauma naked. I'm going to take the time, if I can, to keep their clothes intact. That's the only clothes they own could be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I know we kind of touched upon this earlier with your partnerships and collaborations, with, local EMS, municipality or hospital-based, the fire service and law enforcement. But can you share a success story, an example of collaboration? I know you talked about the fire department, but is there anything another story you can help that would help to improve patient outcomes and community response as a whole moving forward, that maybe some of the people in the room could reach out to you that, could bring something to their community that they might not know about?
Sure. I certainly we can reflect a little bit about a call we had last week where we had two Orthodox women walking on a sidewalk in one of the communities that we cover where a tree fell on them and trapped them. They were pinned. So as you can imagine, in a situation like that, everybody comes out.
Mhm.
Everybody. Police, fire, EMS, multiple cities, everybody's there. And those are the situations in which we want to, number one, provide the best patient care as we can, and number two, provide the a resource to anyone who wants it while we're there. And of course, play nicely with everyone in the sandbox because there is a lot of people in the sandbox. And so I think that's where it pays off that you've met with the police department, you've met with the fire department ahead of time, you've met with the municipal EMS agencies, the hospital-based agencies, so that it's not the first time that you interact with them. Because I won't say inevitably, but almost inevitably, we're going to get there first. And we're going to get there first simply because it's within, in this case, it's within the kind of middle of the Jewish community. We have someone who lives on the corner, another one who lives a block away and happened to be driving by. And it's just this decentralized model that we have people all over the place that, again, I don't want to say all the time, but most of the time, we're going to get there first. And so what I've taught the guys is what we learned in ICS, we learn all along, is that play your role until it's time for someone else to play the role, and then give that role to them, and you go do what the next thing is that you're supposed to do, right? It's not a matter of what patch is on your shoulder. It's not a matter of what vehicle you drove up in. It's a matter of what's going to be best for the patient in front of you at that point in time. And in a situation like this, everybody wants to help. There's not one person there that doesn't want to provide the best possible outcome to the patient, right? We all recognize that. We go into it understanding that that's the case. But as I tell my guys, you don't have to be the one that does this. You don't have to be the one that does that. What's important is that everyone is operating together and that you understand your limitations. We all have limitations. For example, I don't have a chainsaw, so I can't get the patient out from being pinned underneath the tree. So everyone has to understand their limitations and work well together and get out of there as quickly as possible, right? Those are the objectives, and I can say without any reservations that the way that that scene was handled was really well. Every scene can have, a post-mortem where you can look back and how can you improve. Yeah, that exists for everyone and it should. But it went very smoothly. Everyone operated in their responsibility, worked well together, and that's only because we communicate with one another. We have mutual respect for one another. We don't say, this is yours, this is mine, right? It's a matter of working together. And that's not a Hatzalah, not Hatzalah thing. I think we can all agree that multiple agencies sometimes have less than amazing interaction with one another. But it was great to see that the interaction amongst at least four EMS agencies, two law enforcement agencies, and one fire department all went relatively smoothly with relatively short on-scene time post-extrication.
Well, it's great to hear that because that doesn't always work even, in other communities. So
Yeah,
it's great to hear that they all worked very well together. Um, Talking about partnerships, I know recently HATZALAH of Bergen has a new partnership and are expanding roles from the BLS to provide some ALS. If you can you share some information with us?
sure. It's a very new partnership. We started a few weeks ago, and the Bergen HATZALAH paramedics are working in partnership with Robert Wood Johnson. And so the easiest way to think about it is that if I am on a scene and I am providing BLS care, then I am doing so as a Bergen HATZALAH, a member of Bergen HATZALAH. If I am on the scene providing ALS care, I am working under Robert Wood Johnson. The truck says Robert Wood Johnson on it. The medical control is Robert Wood Johnson. The charts are everything is Robert Wood Johnson. It is literally as if we are as we are working as a Robert Wood Johnson or as Robert Wood Johnson paramedics when we are working on a Bergen HATZALAH call. There's no difference in protocols as if I'm working, again, I work 911 there also. We all do.
Mhm.
So it's no different than if I'm on one of their other trucks than if I'm on the HATZALAH designated truck. It just, that one says in partnership with Bergen HATZALAH on it, but the equipment is all the same. The protocols are all the same. The responsibilities are all the same. Charting's all the same. We report into the clinical coordinator at Robert Wood Johnson and the medical director of Robert Wood Johnson's EMS. It's really completely separate.
Okay. How many paramedics do you have that will operate that truck?
We have 2 trucks and we have 12 paramedics.
Excellent. And are those 2 trucks stationed up in Bergen now?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
That's great. No, that's great. And that, again, goes into the innovativeness, if you will, that not only you have done, but also in partnering with someone like Robert Wood Johnson to have that kind of, that kind of expansion. I think that's great. So
And they've
let's
been
kind of,
amazing partners.
yeah, and it's great. So let's kind of start to kind of wrap things up here a little bit. So let's talk about some challenges and lessons learned personally and professionally for you being Bergen HATZALAH. How are things in general? I mean, let's face it, we know in our home rule state of New Jersey that we are territorial, especially as EMS providers, right? If you are a municipal-based, community-based EMS provider, and God forbid another ambulance comes into your town and a person falls in front of their ambulance and they stop to take that call, then the hackles go up in the home crowd of, oh my God, why is there the XYZ ambulance in our town taking care of our patients? I've got to believe that has got to be a daily occurrence with you. Or if it's not, the question becomes, why isn't it? Because you've kind of broken that paradigm if you're not getting that kind of thought. So talk a little bit about that, because yes, you're out there. Yes, we all know about you. Hopefully most of the people sitting in the room have had some level of interaction with HATZALAH at some point in their volunteer or their career. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you've done or kind of the state of the state for you out there operating right now in your catchment area.
So I totally agree with what you're saying that when you have the status quo in anything for a long time and something comes around that disrupts the status quo, it certainly could frustrate people. And so, certainly early on, there was concern by some of the remaining volunteer um, municipal organizations. Remember, several of them have folded over time, but there are certainly some that they're out there and still, still very strong. And I think that they felt threatened. They felt like we were going to um, take over. We were going to reduce the quote value. And I think the answer to your question is time. Um, I mean, early on, I mean, I can't tell you how much time was wasted dealing with these types of situations when, in my heart of hearts, I knew that we have a mission and a focus. We're not going to deviate from that mission or focus, and that mission or focus is going to have very little to no impact in the overall EMS world of Bergen County. And so it really didn't matter what I said, no one would listen to me. It didn't matter what we did, no one would believe us. But I think that time is the only thing that has really made the difference. And that is to say that if you were to look at the local municipal volunteer call volume, it hasn't gone down. If you look at the severity of the calls that they cover, hasn't changed. If anything, it's gone up. So the fret, the concern that Hatzalah was going to somehow impact their operation um, was understandable to a point that, who are these new guys? But it hasn't borne out. And I think that they realize we're now 3 years in, so this is a lot of pain that I'm going through to get us to 3 years in. But I think they all realize that if anything, we're here to help each other. And if really that's our focus, how we help our patients and help ourselves, I think we now retrospectively look back and say, wow, why all the drama? And I have worked with these agencies for 20 something years, and I have nothing but respect for them. They do a great job. They cover a lot of calls and a lot of area at all hours of the night and day as volunteers, like we do. And I think that coexistence didn't seem like a reality to them. And we kind of needed to bury our head in the sands and say, let the noise go, because we believe in what we're doing. Our patients believe in what we're doing. Our community believes in what we're doing. And just let the chips fall where they may. And 3 years later, nobody's call volume's changed. If anything, it's gone up. We're now working well together on, these MVCs that we get dispatched to. And if we could take the model of respect that we all have for each other out there and just apply it here, it's really a non-issue.
Totally agree with you.
Well,
I think for a lot of what we've seen, even in my area, it's at the end of the day, nobody really cares what's written on the side of that ambulance when it shows up. They just want care. And again, perceptually, whether it's a hangnail or it's a STEMI, they want to get care and they want to get prompt professional transport to a hospital. And I even know in my community where when we established a regional collaboration, which would bring mutual aid ambulances in on a regular basis, everyone was really scared of that. And it had the opposite effect. The fact that we now have more consistent ambulance coverage, it doesn't make any difference what the patch is. What makes the difference is we're getting the woo-woo wagon there and we're getting them transported as quickly as possible. And that's what it is. And I think that's what you're saying. It's a universal thing.
Agreed. Yeah.
I think looking at this from, an ALS provider that used to have run-ins with HATZALAH coming out of Passaic County going into Bergen, I think this is an eye-opener for people that truly don't understand what HATZALAH is there to do and why they're there overall. I know we've talked about a lot of lessons learned today, but if there is one thing that you can drive home with our audience today, what would that be?
I would say think of Hatzalah, and again, I'm speaking about Bergen Hatzalah, but I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, as a resource. Hatzalah is there to provide care to whoever seeks our care. And if we can help others in the EMS community in one way or another, whether that's doing, coming to your station and giving a kind of conversation like this, or being a phone consult or even an on-scene consult for someone you run into who you just don't know enough about their religious um, needs, cultural needs. Think of Hatzalah as a resource, an extra ambulance if you need it, right? It's not about pride. We all run out of ambulances at some point. God forbid there's something that people need help. Think of Bergen HATZALAH and HATZALAH in general as a resource. And if you think of us as a resource rather than people who are in our way, people who are trying to take our calls, people who like to do things their way in their, your personal vehicles and not in the traditional ambulances, and put all that stuff aside and just think about how we can be a resource. Um, I think there'll be a different vantage point than the way that sometimes Hatzalah is viewed now. Um, we all have our challenges, and I don't want to say that Hatzalah is some sort of utopia that's different than any other EMS agency out there, but we want to be seen as a resource. We want to be seen as a mutual aid, not just in a technical perspective, but good neighbors. And so that's my take-home message.
Yeah. No, listen, I agree with you. We talked about in the beginning, with the decrease in the volunteer and, the breakdown of a lot of these paid services that are no longer operational across the state, being able to provide a service when something else is not available, like you said, it's a resource. It's there if you need it. So,
Yeah, it is. And look, I think the key takeaway from this hour conversation is what separates us is far less than what makes us similar in what our missions are and what we do. And I think that's it at the end of the day. And we are all facing the same universal issues of shortages of staffing, shortages of agencies going under either financially or because, a better deal can be struck with a hospital-based provider. All of that is minutia at the end of the day. And again, whether you're HATZALAH, whether you are working Robert Wood Johnson, Atlantic, or your Somerville Rescue Squad, or your Clifton Fire, at the end of the day, it's all about working together, getting the care that the patient needs, getting them to the right hospital in the right amount of time. And for that, I think we are all on the same page. Okay. So
Agreed.
Josh Hartman, thank you so much for your time today. Greatly appreciate your information. And do you have an email address that you can tell us just in case anyone sitting here has any questions they'd like to bounce out to you?
Absolutely. It's my first initial last name. So J Hartman, JHARTMAN at bergenhatzalah.org.
Oh,
Bergen as the county, Hatzalah is spelled HATZALAH. J Hartman at bergenhatzalah.org.
and we'll definitely put up a slide and have that information available as well. So again, thank you, Josh. Thank you for your time today, for your wisdom. Adam, thank you for being my co-conspirator here. And
absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
Those
My
of you
pleasure,
in the
guys.
room, hopefully, if you have any questions, please do reach out to Josh. He's been nothing but an absolute gentleman and extremely responsive to any questions that we've had. So again, thank you all for your time today. And you guys can all take a break now. Thanks again, Josh.
Enjoy the rest of your conference.